Welcome to another Blue Room Weekly, and joining me tonight, I'm your host Warren, and joining me tonight, I've got Liam from the Good Times podcast, and I've also got Paul McParlin with me. And lads, if I can, I'm going to start with the final say on Villa, if you like. And if I come to you first, Liam, I think for me, walking out the ground on Saturday, I was a bit frustrated. I was a bit annoyed. I thought we did well, but I was hoping that we'd win that game, and I thought that we maybe perhaps didn't do enough to win the game. And after a couple of days of reflection, really, Liam, I think that thinking about it, I thought, you know what, this is an Everton team in transition. We're a lot better, and we've come a long way from where we were last year. We're going to get weekends, we're going to get games like this, and there is still gaps in the squad that we need to fill. So maybe we're not quite where we'd like to be. And I think Saturday was probably a bit of a reflection of that. What was your perspective of the game or how it went against Villa?
Yeah, I kind of came out of it glass half full, Warren. I think I said to you last week on the weekly that we could draw the game against Villa, but as long as there was a momentum in the performance, then we carry on the momentum that we've had in the past few weeks. And I do think that was the case. I mean, Jordan Pickford doesn't have a saving note to make. There's that very scary shot from Buendia, which 9 times out of 10 goes in against Everton, which was heavily deflected. But we, apart from maybe the first 15 minutes of the second half, we bossed the game. We were the side who were playing on the front foot. We created the most chances. Beto has a couple of good chances. Michael Keane has a good chance. He's denied by a brilliant save from Martinez. Martinez makes a smart save from Grealish. So for me, it was a positive feeling coming off the ground. I do share an element of frustration that you wanted to win the match, but I think the way to look at it is there were only one team trying to win that match, and that was Everton. Villa were very content for a draw. I mean, that was illustrated when they brought Victor Lindelof in as a central midfielder late on to try and kind of, keep what they'd had and settle for the point. It's frustrating as well because Villa have been a bit of a bogey side since they come back up. We haven't beaten them, but this was arguably our best performance against them in that time. And for me, it probably tempers expectations a little bit, and that's not a bad thing because, like many, it's easy to get carried away in a wave of optimism after having 3 or 4 years of crushing disappointments after crushing disappointment. So people have been giddy in the past few weeks. It probably tempers that a little bit, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. And I think if we look at it in the round, if you'd said to someone at the beginning of the season, we'll have 7 points after 4 games and we'll be in the top 6, I think most people would have settled for that, especially when before the season we've been out the top half after the ball was kicked since November 2021. So realistically, we've still made a decent start to the season, and we look in good shape. And I was frustrated the manager didn't make substitutions to maybe go for it a little bit more towards the end, but I also see a positive in that in the sense that compared to the last few seasons, we do have options and we will be able to change it up in the weeks going forward if we need to.
Yeah, I think what Liam's saying there, Paul, about the overriding feeling about coming out with one of positivity. I mean, bar a great save from Martinez or Michael Keane heading it, a yard either side of him, we go home delirious there because we've got a win, and it would have been again another couple of points on the board that I think would have had us in a really good shape and position. But I think for me, as I said earlier, just coming out of it, I thought, you know what, this is an Everton team that are gradually building and gradually going to get better. There is still a few gaps in the squad, as we talked about, but once they are rectified, and it may take another couple of transfer windows before they do, but once they are rectified, I think there's a lot of good there. I mean, I'm not one for XG, but I know it was reported that we're over 2 in the XG there after that game, and I mean that just says that we're creating chances, and if you create chances, you're going to put most of them away, and I think it's got to be a good sign, hasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, Warren. And I think I'm firmly in Liam's camp of the glass half full for the outcome on Saturday, because before the game, I was actually quite apprehensive because we'd had a bit of momentum going into the international break. You're never quite sure in what frame of mind the players are going to come back after the international break. So that was a bit of a concern for me. Secondly, I dislike playing teams who haven't won all season because normally in seasons past, Everton are the go-to team if you want to end your losing streak. We always seem to deliver on those occasions who against whoever we're playing against. So I was a bit apprehensive before the start of the game. But yeah, as like both you and Liam have said there, I think an indication of the progress we've made as a side by the fact that Villa were desperate to take the point towards the last 5 minutes. He showed no interest in going to win the game. And I think that kind of gives an indication that we have made immense strides as a team compared to where we were last season. And I think, as Liam said as well, it's the type of game we could easily have lost last season. But what impressed me most was even in the last 5 minutes, we were still creating chances. We were still going for the goal. And you just felt with a bit of luck, we might just get this one over the line. Like Liam, I was wondering about the substitutions, whether they could have been made a bit earlier. I'm probably being hypercritical there. I do kind of think that if Besso's going to be the starting striker, I know we're going to discuss this later, maybe Charlie Alcaraz is a better player to link with him from the midfield, possibly. But overall, you looked at the options we had on the bench. I mean, Dwight McNeil didn't think it again. Dibbling, could he have come on for the last 5-10 minutes just to offer something different? But overall, I was pleased with the point. In particular, I'm pleased with the fact now that's 3 games at our new stadium. We haven't conceded any goals. We've won 1 in the league. We've won 1 in the League Cup. We've drawn 1 in the league. So still unbeaten at the new stadium, and that kind of gives me a bit of hope and gives me a bit of confidence as well.
Yeah, I'm still riding the positivity train, as it were. I mean, we talked last week, Liam, me and you on the show, didn't we, about how there was a feel-good factor around the club, and I certainly felt that, and I still do feel that. But just a quick word before we move on to what we're going to talk about next. Regarding Villa, I mean, look, I still think they've got great players. I still think that they'll come good. I know they haven't scored yet, but my word, Liam, on Saturday, I thought that was one of the worst Villa teams I've seen in many a year come to Everton. I mean, they weren't great, were they?
No, they weren't. I was actually, even though I know they've made a poor start season, I was actually a bit surprised by how languid they were, especially in the first half of times, because Yuri Tielemans is a player who Evertonians will know he's damaged us when he was at Leicester, one of the best goals I've ever seen at Goodison Park. He's a really good player, but I think where they're suffering is obviously they've not strengthened as much in the summer with PSR. And you look at the second half of last season when they were able to bring players like Rashford and Asensio into the fold. And obviously Daniel Marlin came on at the weekend, but maybe he's not quite lived up to the initial promise when they brought him in from Borussia Dortmund. I think that's where the dip off is for me, because one of the problems Everton have faced in the past few years is that it's increasingly become a game of 16 players. We've been punished in so many games. I think it's at Bournemouth at the beginning of last season where Iraola used his 5 subs fantastically well to, basically snatch a victory they didn't deserve in the last 5 minutes. And that is something that Villa have done well in the past couple of seasons. I don't think they're in a position to do it now. I appreciate they've brought in Harvey Elliott and Jadon Sancho, but they just look a little bit weaker all over the piece for me. Or some of the players are getting a little bit older, like Luca Dean and Tyrone Mings, and they've not quite replaced some of the outgoings. So I have to admit, I was a bit surprised by how poor they were. I still think they've got decent players and they're more than capable of making them recovery. They've got an excellent manager whose track record speaks for itself. But yeah, I think that's where maybe part of the frustration comes in, that we touched upon earlier, is because this is not a Villa who are all guns blazing, who could put us to the sword like they did in 2023 or like they did at Villa Park last season. They were kind of there for the taking. So, yeah, not great from them. But I think as well, that's a good sign for us, isn't it? Because if the teams we're trying to catch are starting to falter a little bit whilst we get a bit of momentum and we look to improve, that can only be a good thing. Now, that's not to say I think we'll be challenging for Champions League places like they have in the past few seasons. But if the teams above you are struggling a little bit and you're getting better, that can only bode well for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I kind of just want to replay the game again and watch it again, because I think if Everton went toe-to-toe with them, I think we will go out and win. I just think there's certain things that, we'd obviously need to improve on, which we will, I'm sure, down the line as we go along into the rest of the season. But one of the players who I thought was absolutely magnificent, Paul, and I know there's been a lot of chat about this, is Michael Keane. I think he's made a really incredible start to the season, and I don't think he put a foot wrong on Saturday against Villa. In fact, I thought he was probably man of the match for me. And again, I just thought his reading of the game, I thought his positional play, and I heard Dave make the comments on Blue Monday saying that he actually looks fitter. And when Dave said that, I thought, actually, yeah, he does. He looks leaner, he looks stronger. Is it a bit unfair to label him as this fourth choice centre half now? Because when he signed that new contract, he was labelled as someone who, was going to be back up to Branthwaite, Tarkowski, and Jake O'Brien if we got that elusive right back in. We now haven't got the right back in, so it looks as if Jake O'Brien's going to be playing right back for the foreseeable. And I think you've got to play Branthwaite when he's fit and he comes back, because he is, the best defender at the club. But there's going to be a very tough decision made, and I can't see him dropping Tarkowski, and that feels very unfair on Michael Keane. He's been brilliant, hasn't he?
Yeah, I think it exceeded everyone's expectations this season. When we got to the end of last season, I was kind of thinking, okay, thanks, Michael, but it's time to go. And that, as the summer went on, and I was kind of thinking, looking at the fees clubs were paying to bring in less experienced centre backs, and I started to think, well, hang on, he's played at the top level, for almost 12 seasons more now, so surely he's worth keeping on as a backup player. But having said that, his performances have really surpassed my expectations this season. I take the point about him looking fitter. I also think he looks more confident as well. I think his decision making has improved dramatically. There's no kind of chaotic troublesome back passes pushing the team into difficulty. I also think as well that his general sort of the way he's fitting in with the team play is better. I think him and Tarkowski have got a really productive partnership at the moment. They both cover each other really well. And in previous seasons where he's been exposed for his lack of pace sometimes, he's not been caught out once this season. So that could also be an indication that he's really worked hard to get himself in peak physical condition. What has impressed me as well is how he's responded to the challenge, because we've had players in the past who really extended the contract. They'd be quite happy just to sit on the bench and pick up the wages. But I think he's actually given the manager something to think about here. I think he's given David Moyes some decisions to consider for the future, because he's proved to be a more than capable deputy for Jared Branthwaite. And it's good to know that if Branthwaite's injury problems kind of don't clear up quickly, we've got a reliable centre-half to stand in there. And the one thing I've always liked about Michael Keane is I've always thought he's a goal-scoring threat. And that header against if Martinez is signed for Man United on deadline day, that goes in the back of the net and we win 1-0. So he's always going to be a threat from set pieces as well. So it's been... all the talk has been about the signings we brought in this summer. I think we also need to recognise keeping Michael Keane here has proved to be one of the best decisions that David Moyes made over the transfer window.
I think, Liam, going forward as well, I mean, I've no doubt that when Branthwaite's fit again, that he comes straight back in. I mean, he simply has to. He's a young English defender. He gives us balance being left-footed to play on that left side of the defence. And I think it's a foregone conclusion that he does come back into the side. But going forward to the rest of the season, I mean, if we do have a few injury problems, I think in the past we've maybe been a bit concerned or worried that Michael Keane's coming in. Has he got a mistake in him? Is he going to give away a free kick or a penalty, which, he has done in the past? But I think what these first couple of games has done for me, it's proven that A, I've got no worries and concerns about him. And B, I think it says a lot about David Moyes' coaching. I mean, do you feel there's an argument there to be said that what David Moyes has done is he's actually made him a better defender?
Yeah, I think there's a possibility you could argue that. I think that comes probably from simplification of the game. I just thought last week with the weekly, one thing I think we really miss when Branthwaite's not on the team, and that's not to dig out either Keane or Tarkowski, is the way he goes, engages, and Tarkowski drops deep. It feels like when it's Keane and Tarkowski's the one who steps out and Keane drops a bit deeper, which suits his style of play, probably suits Tarkowski a bit less. So I think it's really good to have a player who knows he's not first choice, but giving the manager a decision to make. I mean, ultimately, I'm with you. I do think Branthwaite comes back in, and I think Tarkowski's organisational skills compared to Keane's and his chemistry with Branthwaite as well, to be fair, means that unfortunately when Branthwaite is fit, I do think Michael still needs to make way. But as someone who's getting on in his career, I think he might be in a position where he can accept that he's not going to play every week. But if he's coming in and doing a job in 15 to 20 games a season, then that works for him and it works for us, doesn't it? Because he's only signed a 1-year extension. If he plays in 50% of the games a season, he's excellent. He either gives the club the decision or give them maybe a slightly longer term deal, or he can get himself a better deal elsewhere from a selfish perspective. So I think it's win-win. I've been really impressed with his start of the season, and I agree with Paul in that his lack of pace has maybe not been exposed as much, and I think that is possibly down to David Moyes, because as much as Dyche was good defensively, I do think Moyes is actually a better coach defensively as well as offensively. I think he's a bit more switched on, and it's a good thing to have, that challenge centre half. I mean, look, late noughties when Lescott and Jagielka were in the pomp as a pair, they had a capable backup in Joseph Yobo on the bench, and I think that sort of competition is only good for the team and for the individuals. I'm still a little bit wary of some of the teams we've got to face because the fixture list has been relatively kind to us. I wouldn't say we've faced too many overly pacey attackers, and when you look at obviously the goal we could see against Wolves, Keane maybe could have done a bit better for that, the first goal in particular. And I am a little bit worried about going to our friends over Castle Grayskull the weekend because they do look a bit dangerous up top, even though they've maybe not been at their best. So I don't want to go too soon and say all my concerns are extinguished. But I agree with Paul's point about given the market we were in and how much it would have cost us to get another centre half. I think having some of his experience as cover and not spending that money on that is only a good thing for the club. And I think it could prove to be a decent bit of business.
Yeah, I agree. I think it is. I think he's definitely worthy of being more than just a fourth choice centre back. I think his performances have proved that. Where I will agree, and I don't want this to come across as a Michael Keane loving, because it certainly isn't that. But I do agree with you when you say, when we come up against pacey attacks, that's where we could see an issue. I mean, Villa, I think Ollie Watkins is looking a bit of a shadow of his former self at the moment, and he didn't offer much in the way of a threat on Saturday. And Villa were mainly playing a style and a system on Saturday that didn't really get in behind our back four. So that maybe suited both of them at the back a lot more than it would have if we'd have had a pacey player. And we will talk about Liverpool later on. And, I agree with you. I think with their attack line, I think that will prove to be a concern with our back two if they're not on it. But we'll talk about that a little bit later on. I do want to talk about another player who, again, I think has had a fantastic start to the season in James Garner, Paul. And he's done an interview with the club today. Well, it's come out today anyway. One of these long reads that the website put out. And one of the things of note I did see him say was, and he's quoted as saying, "I want to get into that England team. That's my long-term goal. I know it's not going to happen overnight, but I definitely feel like I've got the quality." I think he's been talked up recently, Paul, particularly by Moyes as well, as somebody who should be talked about in that sort of category as being someone who should be considered for the England setup. I think there's a lot of competition in there, but he's another one who's, for me, he's made a great start. And he's had 2 games in the middle, he's had 2 games at left back. I didn't think he put a foot wrong again. I think to deputise at left back in a position that's been an issue with Mikalenko out injured, I thought is excellent option and excellent cover. We probably missed a little bit of his bite in midfield at the weekend again, just to combat some of what, John McGinn, Tielemans and them type of players, Buendia as well, who have found pockets of space at times at the game at the weekend. But yeah, just going back to James Garner, I think that if he keeps playing like he is, maybe you wouldn't say star for England, but should he be considered in that sort of conversation?
Yeah, I don't see why not. I mean, particularly given, he's come through the England system because he was a regular choice for the under-21s, wasn't he? And he played it right back for the under-21s as well. So, in terms of where he played in England, I think the question more, where would he play in an England team? I think if Tuchel takes the view that he needs a utility player who can fill in a number of different roles, I think James Garner's kind of tailor-made for that, because he can play right back, he can play left back, he can play centre mid, he can play wider mid. So he does give the manager some options there as well. And just going back to the left-back position, that is a bit of a problem position at the moment for England. So that could possibly be a way in for them as well. And I know for listeners with longer memories, going back to like the mid-80s, I'm kind of thinking someone like Alan Harper, who was able to slot in a number of different positions and played really well in whichever role he was asked to perform for the manager. So I can see some similarities there as well. But yeah, I mean, James Garner, I think I've come out some more matches this season talking about how well James Garner's played that I have done in any of the previous seasons he's been here. And the fact that stunning goal he scored against Brighton as well just kind of shows he's added a bit of an eye for goal to his game as well. So if we're kind of discussing who's been our player of the best 4 matches so far, then he's somebody else who's definitely in contention as well. And I admire his ambition. and it's realistic as well. He's still quite young. He's still got a possibility of making that World Cup squad, and it just needs 1 or 2 injuries to maybe some of the first choice selections, and then his name has to come in under consideration as well. And it's really good that we've talked before about. Touched on the fact that Michael Keane has kind of improved as a player under David Moyes. I think you see that James Garner has improved as a player under David Moyes as well. I know it's not just down to Moyes, it's down to the coaching staff as well. But this is somebody who I kind of felt was quite inhibited under Sean Dyche, who seems to be playing with far more confidence and freedom since David Moyes has taken over.
Oh, you can see the difference in his performances compared to last season, the season before. I've gone on record as saying I wanted him to show a bit more in games. I didn't always feel that he was a player who could. I hold my hands up and said, certainly after the first 4 games, looking at on the basis and evidence of them, that he's definitely worthy of not only featuring in the side, but being an important player in the side. And look, I know we're only 4 games in, Liam, and I think probably there's a little bit too much competition in England at the moment. But I can't think of, Grealish rightly gets the headlines for everything he's done, Player of the Month for August in the Premier League. I think Dewsbury Hall's made the fantastic start to the season. Iliman Ndiaye, as always, is just a fantastically consistent player and got a bit of trickery and some skill about him. And when he's in full flow, I mean, what a player that we've got there. But low-key, James Garner, for me, in the first 4 games, is arguably being our best player.
I think he's been incredibly steady. I thought he was really good defensively again at the weekend. I thought some of the blocks he made, particularly in the first half, and crosses at the late on, like kind of last ditch, he waited to go to the ground, were really impressive and showed patience as someone who's probably been playing the position a bit longer than his experience belies. I agree with what Paul says about his ambition for England. I think that's really impressive. But you kind of touched upon what my concern would be, is that I just don't see where he would get in the squad at the moment, because in his position, he's got arguably England's most reliable player, Declan Rice, if he wants to play as the kind of holding midfield there. And there are players like Kobe Mainoo, who's on the fringes at Manchester United. He's impressed for England. You've got Conor Gallagher. There are other players in his position who I think maybe offer a little bit more than them. But I think isn't it really nice to speak to the mindset change of the club, as rather than saying we'll do everything we can for the club and we'll try and survive. We've got a player who's talking about kicking on to the top half, looking to play for his country, and he's harping ambitions of getting better. That can only be good for us as a club. Where I would have an element of concern with him is that I felt we were a bit inhibited at times because he is footed, and that's not. I don't mean to criticise him when I say that, but I don't think Michaelenko's a brilliant cross of the ball, but Grealish doesn't have a natural overlap for when he cuts in. It makes us a bit narrower, and he does take a touch and has to go onto his right foot when it comes to a crossing position, which I think sometimes can slow our play a little bit. That's not to say that he's not been brilliant defensively. That's not to say that at all. And obviously, he got a goal from left back against Brighton. But I'd want to see a bit more from him. I mean, in the long run, you were touching before. I know it's not necessarily something that was in the agenda for this, but you touched about Jake O'Brien at right back. If Maitland Roll maybe kicks on, is there an argument to say, given how well he's done defensively at left back, that maybe James Garner could be the solution to the right back problem? Because he's played there a handful of times. In fact, I would argue one of his best, if not his best performance for Everton, came at right wing back against Bournemouth on that pivotal game on the final day of the season in 2023. So maybe, and sometimes this can happen with players, you can kind of stumble upon it. Maybe to hark back to the 80s, it could be a bit like, Paul knows best than me, when Ian Snowden went to right back, and then all of a sudden there was talk of England call-up when someone moved into an unfamiliar position. I mean, I don't know what your thoughts are, but given how good he's been defensively left back, that is something that has crossed my mind in the past few days. So I just kind of wanted to put that back to you guys and see what your thoughts were.
Well, Paul, do you want to elaborate on that point that Liam's made? I mean, could he be used in a right back position in the future?
Yeah. I mean, I don't see why not, because he played there for the England under-21s, didn't he? When they won the World Cup a few years ago, so he's got the experience of playing there as well. So. Yeah, right back is a problem position for us, isn't it? I know Jake O'Brien's filled in adequately, but yeah, I can see James Garner possibly as an alternative long-term solution there. I think going back to the point that Liam made before, maybe the one thing that might just hold him back in that role is Jake O'Brien's quite good at getting forward and bursting down bursting down the flanks with pace. I'm not sure Garner can quite offer that level of speed. And not quite, you'd need to work on the quality of his final crosses. But yeah, I mean, it's given that we've been concerned about the right back position for a long time. I think Jacob Bryan has proved to be an adequate person to stand to cover that position. And if James Garner's also an alternative for that position as well, then maybe, just maybe, we might, as Liam referenced over the Ian Snowden, going back to the 90s, that's something else that could actually be of benefit both to the player and the club.
I think, if anything, Moyes loves a utility player. And it's probably a bit disrespectful to call him utility because his position is midfield. But I think it's nice to know that if we are ever struggling or we do need something done, there's players like James Garner who can step in and do that role like he's done with the left-back position, and perhaps down the line, maybe a right back or right wing-back berth. I think it's always good to have players and characters like that in your squad as well. I can imagine him being the type who, if the manager asks him, he won't moan or he won't complain. He'll get on and do it. And I think you need good professionals like that. And I think he definitely comes across as somebody who is a good professional. But listen, long may it continue, because I think his performances have been fantastic so far. If he can stay consistent, then, even if he doesn't get a call up, why not keep him in the conversation for England? And hopefully one day he can realise that dream and get himself at least in the mentions, or at least in one squad further down the line. We'll wait and see. But we are going to move on, lads, and we've put it off long enough now. I think we need to start talking about it because it is Derby week. We do go to, as I know you like to call it, Liam, like me, we do go to Shelbyville, Anfield at the weekend. And I think, look, I don't need to insult our listeners by talking about what the Derby means and how we all feel, particularly before the game. As Evertonians, we all know what it is, and we all know what it's like to go there, and we know what we're probably going to expect and what we're probably going to see. So I'm not going to, go down that route. But what I do want to talk about is the idea of who starts as striker on Saturday in that early game. I don't think we played to Beto's strengths on Saturday. However, he didn't offer us much. I think, obviously, with a better quality striker in there, we probably have, you imagine Romelu Lukaku playing in that game, prime Rom in that position on Saturday. We probably scored 2 or 3. And we know that Beto and Tieno Barry at the moment aren't quite at that level. I think Tieno Barry did really well against Brighton, and particularly that first goal that Iliman Ndiaye scored. He did some really good hold-up play on the halfway line to allow that move to progress. Mm-hmm. I don't know who I'd favour or who I'd rather want to start. Do you go with Beto, who played reasonably well last season at Anfield and has also done okay, and perhaps it may suit his style and our style if Liverpool are going to have most of the ball on Saturday? Or do we go with the young man in Thierry Barry, who might be a bit of a surprise and you never know what you might get with him, and does he replicate the performance he showed against Villa? I don't know where to stand on this at the moment. Liam, what about you? Who would you go with for that striking position?
Even though I've got reservations about him in the broader picture, I think I can't look past Beto personally. I'm not overly convinced about him in the long run, but I think that Thierry Barry seems like a project player, long-term player, and thrown into a game this magnitude. Yeah, he could swim, but there's an element of sink as well. I think you're just hanging back. And you touched upon Beto at Anfield last season. He had a goal disallowed, one that hit the post. He'd probably argue he should have scored, but he seems to really pose Liverpool some problems. He scored a goal against him at Goodison last season. I think you're right to say that we didn't play to his strengths enough for the weekend. I think we'd need to do that at Anfield, but I also think we've got the capabilities. I mean, look at the sort of ball that Grealish played for Dewsbury Hall at Wolves, or the sort of distribution Dewsbury Hall's capable of means we can get it down the sides to him. And there was one in the first half where it was a longer ball from Tarkowski and he couldn't quite control it, but you could see that at times the team were trying to get him quick down the sides, like they did when he got obviously that brace against Leicester last season at Goodison Park. So for me, I would potentially look to keep Beto in there, because I think he can worry Liverpool's backline. As much as Liverpool have made a good start season in terms of winning games, they have looked a bit vulnerable back at times, and I just feel like Beto's runs down the side could pose them some issues. Canate seems to be set on a move to Real Madrid, and Van Dijk, as good a player as he has been, maybe maybe is not at his best. Obviously, understandably, age catches up with us all. So I would be inclined to play Beto, and I think I always err on the side of caution when it comes to derbies, because obviously in 1999, we gave Kevin Campbell his debut at Anfield, but then Michael Branch just came off the cold playing that game instead of Franny Jeffers. I didn't quite pan out. So there's maybe a little bit of scar tissue there from my perspective, but I think Beto would be the one I would stick with. And that's not necessarily to criticise Barry or to say that I don't think he's going to be a better player in the long run. I just think it's only 5-6 games into his Everton career, and we've still got him on the bench if we need to go for it a bit later on. So I'd stick with Beto just for this game, and maybe with an eye on playing Barry in the Wolves game and then potentially working him into the team after that.
Do you think, Paul, that there's even a consideration in David Moyes' mind? I mean, Liam makes the point there about how he perhaps gives Konate at least some issues, and I agree. I think he made Van Dijk in one particular moment last year look a bit silly, and I think that although against them two as a pair, it might be a difficult afternoon for a Beto. Do you think this is even a consideration? Do you think Moyes is thinking, I might throw Barry in, or do you think it's a dead set from his point of view that Beto starts?
I don't think David Moyes is the type of manager to throw a youngster into a game like that. And I agree with what Liam says, that for me, that this is not the match to give Barry the starter role in this game. I think as well, you want someone the Everton starts on 11 who's got the experience of scoring against Liverpool, and Beto's that man. And certainly in the Goodison derby in particular, he caused the Liverpool defenders all sorts of problems. Van Dijk in particular doesn't like forwards who run at him as well, so I'm sure that's something else we could work upon. I'm still, and I don't see how the manager would solve this, but I look back at last season. To me, Beto's best games were when Charlie Alcaraz was providing him with the service, playing quick, rapid passes on the ground behind the back four. Now, at the moment, Alcaraz doesn't seem to be a regular starter in Moyes' plans, but I've always thought that last season the Beto-Alcaraz partnership worked really well. So that's something to consider. Now, obviously, you've got like Jack Grealish now who can maybe offer a similar level of service, but one thing we can't do is give Beto high balls to do with, because I just don't think he's got the touch and control to deal with that. But if you give him something to run onto, then he's got time to get his coordination right and then pick the ball up and do something with us. Also think as well that in the game on Saturday, though he didn't score against Villa, he did tie up their central defenders an awful lot as well and let them know they'd been in the game. So I think on every level, Beto has to get the nod to start. And I'm just wondering, I don't know what the rules are these days, but is there any possibility that we could see if Ornella Vignola could come on as a sub at some stage?
I know. Well, if anyone can score at Anfield like the way she did, then yeah, listen, I'll take any sort of goal. But is there any scope at all? Either of you feel free to comment on this. Is there any scope at all that he starts someone like maybe Iliman Ndiaye up there and brings Alcaraz in? I mean, I've heard a few whispers of people saying that, and it's obviously come out as well that it's maybe Iliman Ndiaye's natural position, not on the wing, but playing as that forward player. Is there any scope for that? I don't know. I mean, Liam, do you think that's a possibility, or do you think we'll ever see that maybe?
I think it's something I would like us to explore at some point, but I don't think this is the game for it. I think the physicality of Van Dijk and Konate against Ndiaye, as tricky as he is, mightn't be great. But then also, it's who do you bring in? You bring in Diblin, a bit like the Barry thing. You don't really want to be throwing Diblin into that, as is Everton. Is Everton bow? I know it came against Anfield, was Everton bow in terms of the Premier League? And by the same token, do you then bring the one-footed Dwight McNeil, who Moyes clearly doesn't seem to fancy in the team? I do see Paul's point about Alcaraz maybe coming in, but I don't think Alcaraz has looked great when he's played off the sides. I think he looks best playing, unfortunately, where Dewsbury Hall is, and I think there will be games where Dewsbury Hall can drop alongside Gay or Roll, and you can put Alcaraz in off the striker, which I think is his best position. But I like the idea of playing Ndiaye up there, and I do think it could be something we do in the long run. But I think to experiment in this game, it would probably be a bit too soon. And I also don't think it's in the manager's makeup as well. As much as I think he gets a bit of an unfair reputation, he's used players like Jared Bowen up front really well at West Ham. I think when he's got Beto at the moment, I just think he'll err on the side of caution. Look, I'd love to be wrong. I'd love to go there, ill him and die, plays up front, becomes the first men's player in however long to get that hat-trick at Anfield, and we lay waste them. But I think in real terms, it might be a game to be a bit more on the side of caution, if anything. That would be my view. But obviously, I do think it's something that we could use in certain games going forward, especially games where we're going to have more of the ball. But I think as well, looking at the way we play, particularly through Jack Grealish and getting crosses in, you probably want a bit more physical presence. Although I do agree with Paul's point that I think Beto in the air or with long balls is not necessarily his forte at all.
Yeah, and I think, Paul, as well, that, maybe like Liam says, it's maybe a thing to experiment as we go forward, but this is not the game perhaps to do it in. I do think, though, that one place where we might see something a bit different, and I'm not necessarily saying a starting position, but was very impressed with Merlin Rowe, Paul. I mean, for the cameo he did, he looked solid. He looked like he likes a tackle. He was fairly accurate in the pass. And look, I'm only judging it off 15 minutes. Of course, we need to see it more. We need to see more of him consistently in the team, and we need to see him play more minutes. But again, if Moyes turns to him on Saturday and throws him on with 20 minutes left, I'm not fearful. What did you make of his performance, and do you think that that's something else to consider as well?
Yeah, I think after his performance on Saturday, I think Merlin Rowe's definitely put himself in contention for the place. I definitely think he's better suited to that midfield role than Tim Iroegbunam, although I thought Iroegbunam played well on Saturday as well. But there was one bit in the last 10 minutes. So when Rowe got the ball, kind of did a pirouette with it, dragged the ball back up from front to back, and left about two defenders just bemused to create space for himself. So he's obviously a talented player. He's a confident player. Whether it's I think the dilemma with derby matches is: do you go for the cautious approach, given what your opposition is, or do you try something unexpected to take a gamble, knowing it could turn out to be, it could backfire badly? So I think that's the issue for the managers to decide. One thing I would say, I think for the derby game, is that we've got lots of options off the bench there, and I think one thing we might have to consider on Saturday is bringing subs on at an earlier stage. I mean, Liam made the point at the start of the podcast about football being a 16-man game. It increasingly is these days, and we've in previous season we haven't had the options on the bench to come on and affect the change. You look at Fulham this season, the number of changes they've made towards the end of the game, they've actually won matches for them. So I kind of think maybe if you're starting better, if it's not worked out, get Barry on after 60 minutes rather than 75 minutes. If the midfield's struggling, bring Merlin Rowe on maybe after 60 minutes. Make the changes a little bit earlier just to see if that can produce a change in the dynamic. But it's always a horrible fix, this one. And our record at Anfield since COVID has been pretty abysmal. I think we lost the last 4 games there. We haven't scored a single goal. So from my perspective, if we go there and get a 0-0 draw, I'm delighted. I think the problem we're going to have is, and we saw this with Simon Hooper on Saturday, I think quite often with Everton, when we go there, it's not about how we play on the pitch. It's about the match official who's been given charge of that game. And given the recent tendency for matches to be played until Liverpool scored the winning goal, I always have a concern about that.
Just a word on them, Liam, as well. I mean, you say look, and it pains me.
You want to wear it on them? I say Diablo. You want to wear it on them? I say Diablo. It's Spanish for devils. But
yeah, no, definitely. Well, I mean, look, it was definitely that on Sunday. But it pains me to say this, but I think the amount of times they keep scoring late. I mean, I think, I don't know if you're anything like me, but I know in all the WhatsApp groups, I mean, as soon as they go one behind, or it's a draw going into the later stages, the comments normally are, at what minute are Liverpool going to get the penalty, or have you put money on them because it's a certainty. It's starting to feel a little bit like with them at the moment. It's not just becoming luck; it's becoming a habit. And I hate saying that, but it does feel that way. And I know they've not played the best. And I'm loath to talk a Liverpool side up here. I really am. And please, the people listening, don't have a go at me for this when I say this, but I watched them in the first couple of games, and they have not been at the best. And I worry that if they click, it could be a concern. I do think, however, Everton are as in a good a shape as we have been for a long time going there. And you know, Paul said about the record there, and it's a truly horrific record. I mean, we've got a terrible record there, regardless of Premier League era. Anyway, we've always had the poor record there. Do you think that they will pose a massive threat? You know, we talked earlier about the pace in behind and Michael Keane and Tarkowski not necessarily having to deal with that yet. Is that going to be Everton's biggest concern at the weekend?
Yeah, I mean, you know, looking at the front line, I think you'd have to be mindless. Like you'd have to be, you know, you'd have to be very myopic to not be concerned about the threat they bring. You know, ultimately, although he'll still require some work in, you know, Alexander Isak have been there an extra week by the time this game pops around. I don't think he'll necessarily start, but they've got a player who was probably the best striker in the Premier League last season, able to come off the bench to swap for another striker who has made a very impressive start. And, you know, I always feel like they never buy any duds, do they? When they buy strikers, they always seem to just buy people who hit the ground running. There's the odd one, there's the Darwin Núñez, there's the Balotellis and the Barinis, but per se, they tend to buy really well in that position. And I think they were obviously champions of the counter last season, and they've upgraded attacking wise. So yeah, I think we will have to be on our guard. And I was a bit disappointed to hear David Moyes say about Jared Branthwaite being weeks away. Maybe there's a bit of mind games for him, but as much as we were talking about Michael Keane's reliability, I would love to have him back in for this game for his physicality, his pace, and also you touched on it there, the balance, because we've got no natural left footers in the side now apart from Jordan Pickford. So it would be nice to have someone who could give us a bit more balance, particularly at the back. And you've got to be incredibly wary of them because they are the champions and they've only got stronger. That said, I think, you know, you've also got to go there with a positive mindset, because the first few games have also shown, particularly the games against Newcastle and Bournemouth, which I did watch, is teams can get at them. You know, they can be got at. They're still very dangerous and they're relentless. And you're talking about it not being luck. It's not. They're a good side and they're making their own luck by staying in games and taking chances and making changes. But as much as we've got a lot of fear from them, I do think for the first time in a while, I feel like we can go there and give them something to be a bit more worried about than we probably have done in a long time, to be honest with you.
I think, Paul, as well, that it's always a game it's the derby. Look, and its passions are going to run high. They always do. And, you know, I know our sets of fans, who, particularly those who are going on Saturday, it'll be one that everyone's up for. I think there's no question that David Moyes and the team and the squad will be up for it. And I think the players know what's at stake as well. You know, no one wants to lose a derby. And I think especially some of the players who've been at the club for a long time now will know what it means. And, you know, you like see Jack Grealish as well. Look, he's played in Manchester derbies. He's a Villa boy. He knows what it's like to be in that city where the rivalry is so passionate as well between Aston Villa and Birmingham. So I'm in no doubt that the players are naive and they don't know what it's about. But I think for me, Paul, as well, you know, I'm looking at it again and I'm thinking that whilst I agree with Liam that they definitely can be got at, it's particularly at the back. They haven't looked comfortable. You know, Bournemouth went there and played really well. They conceded obviously a couple at Newcastle against 10 men until he got that late goal against them as well. You know, they barely frustrated them for long periods at the weekend. I think that there's an option there for Everton to do something, especially with our creative forces that are on the field now. I do just have this nagging concern that it's sooner or later it's going to click for them. I hope it's not at the weekend, but I mean, how do you see it going, Paul? Do you think that Everton have got a chance of doing something? I mean, I'd take a point now if it was offered to me, but can Everton go there? I mean, it's going to happen 1 year, isn't it? We are going to go there 1 year and get a result. I'm not necessarily suggesting this is the weekend to do it, but can Everton go there and cause any issues or any trouble for them, particularly in their back line?
I think Everton have to go there with the attitude that, yes, we can. I think that there are a couple of things that may possibly work in our favour. I always prefer the Anfield derby to be earlier in the season rather than later in the season when they're pushing for silverware and they need the win desperately. So we kind of avoid that scenario as well. I think the half-12 kickoff helps a bit as well, because to me, the actual half-12 kickoff games is never quite as intense as what it is during like an evening derby fixture as well. So that could possibly work in our favour. Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, Liverpool haven't quite got going at the moment, and you've seen, particularly in the Bournemouth game, when Semenyo was running at the defence and causing all sorts of problems. I know they are vulnerable to to defenders having to deal with pace. Given the age of Van Dijk these days, it's definitely something that we need to play on. I think one factor that does kind of give me some cause to wonder is, I don't think David Moyes has ever won a game at Anfield when in the teams he's managed, and so he must be desperately wanting to break that sequence with a win at Anfield during his managerial career. I'm sure he doesn't want to retire with that hanging over him. So in terms of, I don't think the players need any motivation for this game whatsoever. And it's good as well that we've now got players in that squad with winning mentalities. You've got Jack Grealish, who's been used to winning things with Manchester City. You've got Dewsbury Hall, who's been used to winning things with Chelsea as well. And it's good to have that type of player in the dressing room who won't go there, who won't feel intimidated. And I think we've got the strongest squad we've assembled for quite a few years now. So there's no reason why we don't go into this game with a high level of positivity. Now, as I've asked before, there's always certain things you can't control. You can't control the match officials. You can't control VAR. You can't control how much time had on for injury. But given the team that we've got, I think we have to go across there with every hopes of getting at least a point from the game.
Absolutely. I would, like I said, I hope it doesn't sound too defeatist or negative, but I'd absolutely love a point if we can get one. I think that just keeps the unbeaten run going, and then we can look forward to the West Ham game and then the Wolves game in the Cup then, and hopefully that'll just keep our season and the momentum going. I usually do at this point ask for a prediction from you both with the game coming up at the weekend. I'm not going to do that this week. I feel it's a bit unfair when it's Derby week. All I will say, though, is that, I hope that Everton can go and do what you've both said and at least put in a performance and show something. And we're definitely in a better position now than we've been in a long, long time. So I won't ask predictions. I'll save that for the game next week. But we will leave it there. It's always a funny one, Derby week, isn't it? We've talked about it there, and I wasn't nervous. I didn't really give it much thought beforehand. And after talking to you two now, the nerves are well and truly kicking in already, and that will only get worse as the week goes on. But yeah, we will leave it there, and hopefully on the weekly next week we'll be talking about a famous win, if not at least a point at Shelbyville. So there we go. My thanks to Paul and to Liam for joining me on the weekly this week. Don't forget to listen to the rest of the Brew Room content that we've got coming up. We will have a post-match for that Derby game at Anfield, and we'll be back with all your usual stuff as well, including the byline and Blue Monday, and then we'll be back obviously as well next week ourselves. We'll leave it there. Enjoy the rest of your week, whatever you lot are doing, and hopefully your Derby weekend, or our Derby weekend, should I say, goes as well as possible, and we're all smiling come Saturday evening. There you go. My thanks again to the lads. We'll speak to you next week. Up the Toffees.